All right, so we finally struck a nice little phase one of this trade deal. And there's obviously a lot of questions regarding this because the main question obviously is what the heck is phase one? What does that mean for us? I mean, how many phases it's going to be? What's going to come of it? So, in my opinion, this is probably going to be some sort of three-phase deal before all said and done. Obviously, any sort of this trade deal, it's essential now. We need this trade deal done. The sooner the better, not only for the Chinese economy, but obviously that's impacting the global economy as well. So it's important to consider that. The Chinese economy's a little bit in the pooper, and this could obviously help just a little bit for them. And it obviously will help us as well, depending on what we might see. Obviously, our economy's still rocking pretty strong, but it'll be beneficial to have a trade partner back that we've somewhat lost. So here, obviously, we've reached a joint trade agreement on joint trade. It'll avert new round of tariffs on Chinese goods that were set to take effect yesterday. China said it will increase imports on, or China will increase imports from the U.S. and other countries, and the deal will remove tariffs on Chinese goods in phases. So again, here's this talk about phases. So each phase is going to be covering different topics, different fields. Some being electronic type devices, others being agricultural. So if you think about that, it all depends on how each phase comes into play, on how the next one will actually come into play. And it's not entirely going to be an entire wave of any sort of tariffs. There certainly probably still will be tariffs for quite a while, but this is a reduction and kind of like finding a somewhat of a middle ground. So China will make corresponding moves to U.S. tariff reductions. The deal, after proofreading and legal checks, will be signed the first week of 2020. Fantastic. That's what we're looking for. It'll reduce the tariffs on $120 billion of imports to 7.5% from the 15%, so half of what they previous were, which, is a significant amount. Still obviously tariffed, but it's a significant amount. So the phase one deal covers agricultural, intellectual property protection, tech transfer, opening China's financial industry and currency. The Chinese Commerce Vice Minister Wang Shouwen said, "Love it, love it, love it." So they plan to import wheat, rice, corn within quotas, but officials did not answer a question on the size of the purchases. But there are going to be some purchases from the farmers, which is fantastic. These U.S. farmers getting some of these things imported. Gotta love it. And you know what? Obviously, massive purchases on agricultural product, energy, and manufactured good, plus more. Negotiations on the phase two will begin immediately, and phase two will depend on the implementation of phase one. And again, and I've said this before, I think a lot of what's going to happen with any sort of finalization and actually being done with all of this nonsense is it's going to really rely on the election. I think as far as the 2020 election is concerned for the U.S., I think this is a good leverage tactic if you're, Mr. Donald here, because you can absolutely use it as a reason to have yourself get voted back in, And I think there's a lot of factors to consider here as well. So this could be a good leverage tactic, but if you think about the U.S. economy and all these fear-mongering economists saying 2020 recession, here we come, baby, it is nearly impossible for an incumbent president to actually win re-election if the economy is in a recession. The only way I think it could be possible would be something like this, because if you're Trump, you can actually speak to this, that we can get a trade deal done, and this could help the economy, spurt back up. We'll see how it goes. I'm personally, I don't necessarily see that much fear of immediate recession. It could be maybe towards the end of 2020 potentially, but overall the economy is still looking still looking positive, and we're on a little bit of a downtrend, obviously. So we'll have to see how that turns out in the future. But again, this trade deal could entirely be part of. It could just wait. And if we're speaking recession, I just wanted to speak a little bit about my opinions on the market right now, what I'm doing in terms of buys and stuff like that. Currently, I think we're slightly overvalued, and I'm personally 100% okay if we were to find a correction here. Obviously, I think we've been held somewhat in check because of 2018 was a pretty rough year in terms of the market, but this year 2019 has been absolutely crazy in terms of what we've been able to pull off. So it's pretty well the equivalent of 3 years worth of gains this year almost. So if you consider that, I think that there is definitely a chance that we might be able to see some sort of correction, not necessarily a crash. I don't like people talking about crashes, but we could see a correction like we did at the start of 2018 potentially. We saw the market drop pretty significantly, and I would not be too upset if that were to happen. So overall, in terms of buys, I've done a lot less buying. I don't think necessarily if you're in a time of correction or crash even that you need to stop buying. I think it's completely absurd to do that because that's when you're going to find the best deals. But there's also some stocks, even when this market's as high as it is right now, there are plenty of stocks out there that are actually good deals. That's where research comes into play. So just because the market as a whole is most likely a little bit overvalued, there's definitely still some companies there that have good fundamentals that just maybe there's some news point about them that's had them beat down consistently, and they're not necessarily seeing the same valuation that you're seeing from the majority of the sector or the majority of the market as a whole. So if you're considering obviously not wanting to buy anything, I think that's not necessarily the right rationale in terms of this. I could say there's plenty of good deals. I would say I am definitely relatively cash heavy right now. Cash as in terms of money sitting on the sideline, because I want to put in a lot of money once we see any sort of crash or any sort of price drops. I want to be able to dollar cost average. I want to be able to buy shares a little bit cheaper than what they're at right now. There's some specific stocks I really want to get a lot heavier into, but I'm going to need to see a little bit of decrease before I can actually make that happen, just because I think it'll be for the best value if I get the shares a little bit cheaper. There's a couple stocks, obviously, I believe that are still fair value to buy. So Facebook is one of those that I'm still continuously buying because overall, I think the valuation is very cheap on it for the company at hand. I don't think it's necessarily receiving the same sort of overhype and overvaluation that a lot of these tech companies are. They're really very fairly valued as a company right now. And as far as that's concerned, there's these companies that are not really doing anything near what Facebook's doing, and their valuation is absurdly higher. And there's a couple stocks, and obviously we'll see. I can detail a video regarding what I might want to buy in case of dips if you're interested, but overall, I do think that I want to see potentially a little bit of a correction because it'll let me put a little bit more money, a little bit heavier into the market. My goal really is to get this portfolio built up, or all my portfolios really. I want as much money in the market as I can get, and I think it's everyone's real goal is going to be early retirement. I can say that I want that, but the only way I'm really going to achieve that is by building this portfolio consistently, which is why I put in a similar. I budget the same amount of money every week to put into each of my accounts. There are different amounts of money per account, but I do budget out that set amount of money to be divided in between the three accounts every single week. So I do put weekly deposits in. I don't necessarily purchase stocks every week, but I do put weekly deposits in, so that way I can have that money in those accounts and I'm ready to buy when I need to buy. So we'll see how that entirely looks. I hope you enjoyed this, and those are my opinions on what's going on here. So let me know if what you might want to see in the future, and I will gladly make it.